And now that we've created our first ZeroTouch node, added documentation, and renamed the output, let's go ahead and look at how to add multiple inputs and to further expand upon the output. In this lesson, we are going to be looking at defining multiple inputs for our custom node and naming our outputs. That's going to be a bit of a review because we covered that in the previous lesson. So it's fine, we're going to go ahead and do it once again. In the case of inputs for ZeroTouch nodes, everything in the parentheses, so on line 21 in this example, are going to be the inputs. So at this point, up until now, we don't have any inputs on our ZeroTouch node. So comma separated values will represent more inputs. You define what object it is, so in this case a string, a username, and then we tell the rest of the code what to do. In the case of the output on line 20, we are renaming that with a description as well. Once again, we did this in the previous lesson. Our outputs generate the names in the documentation, and Visual Studio should automatically do a lot of this stuff with that IntelliSense. So we will see that as we are coding within the Visual Studio environment. So with that in mind, let's go ahead and jump into our Visual Studio solution and add some more inputs to our first ZeroTouch node. All right, so here we are on our ZeroTouch node as we left it from our previous lesson. If you don't have it open yet, go ahead and get it open and resume the lesson. But here we are. We're in the class My First Node. That's private on line 15, and we have our first ZeroTouch node on line 21. So what we're going to do is scroll down to line 21, and in the parentheses, we're going to start typing a few things. In this case, we're going to type in string. You'll see that IntelliSense is doing a lot of work for us. So we're going to hit tab to let that auto correct, kind of, if you will, and it automatically adds that for us. If you take a quick look at the little red squiggly, it's saying that we need an identifier. So we need to name this variable. In this case, we'll go ahead and have them input their username. So now we have that, and we can hover on it and see that we're not using it. So Visual Studio is really great about this. It's constantly prompting us to use things that we haven't used yet. That way we don't have wasted stuff in our code. So in the case of username, we're not using it. So it's saying go ahead and remove it if you're not going to use it. We're going to go ahead and use it. In this case, we're going to do hello world. We'll replace the word world with our username. So concatenating strings or combining strings, there are a lot of different ways to do this. I'm going to show the easiest way first, and then we'll look at a few other ways that it'll help us along the way. So we'll do hello plus username. Tab will autofill that once again, and we will see that we have the plus sign and username. If we navigate to build and click on build, we will get a notification in the lower left hand corner that our build has succeeded. At this point, we're going to go ahead and open Dynamo, so we'll just fire that up right now. And we already have this DLL imported, so it will load automatically for us once again. So that's one of these things while building these nodes. It's really nice because Dynamo just keeps on reloading it for us, which is really nice. We're going to click on Launch Dynamo. We'll click on New, and as always, we'll navigate through and place our first node. Now we can see that we have one input on our ZeroTouch node, and it's not running without that input fulfilled, and that's because it's expecting a value. So I'll just double click for a code block in Dynamo, and just put in my name, put in your own name for this example, and we'll plug that into our input, and we'll see that it says hello John. What's one thing you notice? You'll notice that it just says hello John without a space. That's because we wrote our code that way. We have no space accounted for within our code. That is something you need to keep in mind when combining strings or anything else in your code for that matter. Additionally, if we go ahead and test this node a little bit more and try to put a number in, it will return a null value. Reason being, our input of username, if we hover on it, it is expecting a string. So you can see string as the data type that we're expecting. So we are telling the user, hey, you need to input a string for this to work. So I'm going to reconnect that, and we'll see that it's working. In this case, if we were to add the space in front of my name, it will fix it, but we're going to account for that in our code now as well, just because it will be a little bit better to do that. So we'll go ahead and close this Dynamo graph, click no. And we are back in our code once again. So in this case, we do have that going on. Hello username. You'll see that that's new. That's what that little blue dash lines mean on the left-hand side. That's telling us in GitHub that's going to be something that's modified or new. So what we'll do is we'll say add input to ZeroTouch node. We're going to say commit all and push. Those little blue squigglies disappear, and now our code is backed up on GitHub. Once again, always back up your code. Really important to do. Just do it. GitHub has storage for you. You should just use it. In this case, we are able to account for the space if we just hit space after hello, but that's not the best way to do this. So we're going to introduce a little bit of a concept here that's a little bigger called string interpolation. So there are a few different ways to do this, but if we were to put in a $ in C#, this is us allowing the compiler to let us combine several strings into one. This is kind of a superpower of C# versus Dynamo, for instance. Dynamo, you have to use the plus sign kind of situation. This is really cool in C#. So if we were to, let's go ahead and just remove that $ for now. And we're going to go ahead and do it all right on line 24 next to return. So we'll go ahead and delete all of this. We'll hit $, and now we'll do quote, quote. That is a valid string now in C#. So it's going to return a blank string. And if we were to type in hello, comma, space, it's all working. Where it gets really cool in C# is if we type in a curly brace, open curly brace, and a close curly brace, that allows us to introduce variables into our code, which is really, really cool. This is one of those things that Visual Studio will suggest along the way if you're combining strings. That's how I even know it. This isn't something I've learned just out of the blue. It's something I learned along the way, and Visual Studio really kind of helped me learn that. The specific tool that does additional suggestions for Visual Studio is called ReSharper. It is a paid tool. I'll include a link for it in the lesson notes for this lesson. I use it on a daily basis when I'm writing code, but for this course we're not using it because it is paid. So I encourage you to go look at it. I will add some supplemental notes for it, but ReSharper is huge. It helps you predict a lot of this stuff. So IntelliSense in Visual Studio is kind of like a superpower. ReSharper is like a super duper power. So it's something to look at if you're willing to add a little bit of extra money into your coding environment. In this case, in our curly braces, we'll type in username. It predicted it, and I hit tab, and now that is a valid string. Really cool, because now we're making that smarter to where we can start to use these things. So that's kind of how that's working. We'll go ahead and navigate in here, and we will see that we are having our description as well and all those good things. Let's go ahead and do build solution. We'll see build succeeded in the lower left-hand corner, and we'll open Dynamo once again. Within Dynamo, it will auto-load the DLL as always, and we will go ahead and take a look at the values that we're getting. Click on New, navigate through, and place that node once again. I'll type my name, plug that in, and now we see hello John, or hello your username. So pretty cool. An additional thing in here that we will notice is that this string does not have any kind of description on it. So we do want to add a description as well. That's done in Visual Studio, just like it is for the outputs. So we'll go ahead and close Dynamo, and let's add those now. All right, back in Visual Studio, we can see that we have username. And another thing that I want to mention is that in Dynamo, it's read the node whenever you initially place it because it expects a value. So for hello username, we can actually define a default value, which we'll do in a moment. So instead of actually having the user always define it, we can go ahead and say equals quote for string Dynamo user. That is now a default value that we're able to use in Dynamo and have that fulfilled by default on placement. So default values are pretty big in the Dynamo world, and that's how you add them as well. You will notice if we hit comma, we can add other input parameters in here as well. So we can make some that are optional if we want and things like that. So what we can do is we can say string extra message. And we will notice that we have a red squiggly right here, and it's because optional parameters that have an equal already need to appear after required ones is what it's saying. In this case, our extra message, we're just going to make it a blank string. So we're not always going to use that, but it is available to us. So there are two inputs that we're going to use. So we will see that they are both in here and they aren't named at this time. Within C# for our documentation, we do need to add a few things to define the descriptions of these inputs. And the way that we're going to do that is we're actually going to name these parameters. So if we type in a bracket param, it tells us kind of what's going on already. So IntelliSense is already helping us remember what we're missing. In this case, we are missing 2 parameters. So we're going to hit enter on the first one. We'll close that parameter. We'll enter again and we'll type in param. And it is predicting for us, which is really nice. Just like our return on line 22, we can add a description for these inputs. So we'll go ahead. I'm going to organize these a bit better because it did suggest them to me in reverse order. That's more of a nitpick thing. And we'll say your username as our description. And for our extra message, we'll say optional extra message from Dynamo. Awesome. We aren't using that extra message yet, so let's go ahead and add that to our return value on line 26. We'll hit period, space, curly brace open, curly brace close, extra message. And now that extra message will appear if we use it. So that's another thing to keep in mind. We'll go ahead and do build solution, open up Dynamo, and we will see that it's going to load this updated DLL once again. It's kind of something that we're just going to get used to after a while. We'll launch Dynamo, click on new, and we'll go ahead and place our node once again. Username and extra message are already fulfilled, so you will see that those are fulfilled for us. I'll double click for a code block and type in John once again, and that's updating now. We'll add an extra message, tie that into extra message, and now we have a ZeroTouch node with 2 inputs that both have descriptions. So both these should have descriptions, your username and an optional extra message from Dynamo, and they have default values. So really quickly we built a ZeroTouch node with documentation and multiple inputs and a named output as well with a description as well. Really cool. We have a lot of things going on in this node, which is pretty nice. In this case, this node will just work. It has all those descriptions with the default values for us. If you were wanting to make your node accept more things than just a string, you can do that, but I encourage you to always hard code what you're looking for just to minimize errors. Someone could input any kind of different value and kind of mess up the node, and as you get into the Revit API, that could prove to be very difficult to catch. So I just encourage you to kind of handle those things on the fly if you can. In the case of username, we are having the user type in their username, so it's kind of odd. We can absolutely find other ways to extract their username. So the other really great thing with C# is we can find code that we can kind of just use in Dynamo. So in the lesson notes below, there is a link to just a search for code on Stack Overflow. So if you just search anything C#, so if you search C# how to get the current username, you're probably going to find it. So it's one of those things that's really easy to kind of use. You'll see that someone has a suggestion here. It has a variable already assigned and all this good stuff. So you can actually build your code to be a little bit more adaptable in that way. So instead of having a user type in their username all the time, you can automatically get it from the PC that they're logged into. With anything C# related, you can give it a quick Google search and start to use that within your code now, which is pretty cool when it comes to C#. In this case, we got to make sure we close Dynamo. We'll jump back into Visual Studio. We're going to add on line 25 that username parameter that we found on Stack Overflow. In this case, it's username, and it's named nicely. I like how it's named. We'll paste that and replace username. We'll go ahead and remove username from our inputs. We'll see all the little squiggly lines telling us that we need to update it. And then we can go ahead and hit save, build it. Build succeeded. We'll open this in Dynamo and then we'll see if it works. Sometimes some of the code that you will find might not work. You might be on a different version of Windows than whoever submitted that idea is, but it's always worth trying. You can do a lot of really cool things in this way. I'm going to click on new, ZeroTouch unraveled, my first node, hello world, and we'll see that it actually found the whole username along with my computer name. So it's the entire username, which is kind of interesting. Extra message, we can say, how are you? And that's still getting added as well. So really cool. We're actually extracting information from the system, which is pretty cool. Navigating back to that thread, you can see kind of the different ways to do it as well. So environment username, I believe, only accepts the username. This one's kind of the whole name with the computer name included. So a lot of different stuff. As a kind of next steps for this lesson, I encourage you to try a few other things. There's domain name out there, hard drive size, what have you. You can find all sorts of different things extracted this way in C#, which is pretty cool. So with that in mind, we do have that option within C#. With that code built, let's go ahead and sync our code. So we'll hit save and we'll say auto obtain username. We'll commit all and push. And now that code is synced to GitHub and saved for us, which is really nice. Awesome. And now with that done, we have our ZeroTouch node. It's kind of like a second ZeroTouch node, if you will, because we've added so much to it and modified it. We have that complete. We have inputs defined. We defined multiple inputs. We reverted it back to one input. We have a named output, our description's enabled, and we even pulled some code off the internet to use within our node. One of the best ways to learn is to do that. So I encourage you to check out other ways of extracting data from the system for your ZeroTouch node as well. With that in mind, we will see you in the next lesson where we look at references and we start getting into some more of the reference things for the Revit API as well.